Welcome back to Top 10 Tunes. Today we're going to be looking at the top 10 modern death metal albums of all time. Coming in at number 10 is Deathless by Revocation. By the release of 2014's Deathless, Dave Davidson and company were poised to release a definitive statement in either technical death metal or thrash metal, but this album seemingly exists in both worlds. The aggression and lyrical content of Deathless owes to the earlier thrash metal giants of the 1980s and 90s, while the use of blast beats, jazz-tinged soloing, and chord structures, the use of extended range guitars, and modern hallmarks of virtuosic tech death. While Revocation would have yet to achieve any inclination of mainstream success, they would cement the reputation as modern death metal band with Deathless, and would become a staple opening act for many of the genre's largest practitioners thereafter. Taking the number 9 spot is Twilight of the Thunder God by Amon Amarth. They were by no means a new band and had already developed a unique sound, image, and debatable microgenre, Viking metal. It was Twilight of the Thunder God, however, that broke this band's brand of melodic death metal. Distilling one of the most widely known stories of Norse mythology and blending some intense vocal delivery and instrumentation with sing-along riffs, Amon Amarth's 7th album affirmed their sound up until that point, while also feeling like the announcement of a band still hungry to make their opening statement. At number 8 is L'Enfant Sauvage by Gojira. Perhaps a controversial choice considering Gojira's influence with progressive metal, Gojira's impact in death metal can't be understated. Joe Duplantier's impassioned vocal and real-world environmental horror changed the trajectory of extreme metal. L'Enfant Sauvage continued this further and began to include a greater sense of groove and hypnotic rhythm to otherwise technical death metal tropes. Songs like the title track L'Enfant Sauvage and Born in Winter brought a progressive contemplation to otherwise technical riffing, yet the album would also aid in Gojira's transition towards mainstream notoriety, name-checking them alongside modern metal bands like Lamb of God and Mastodon. This album didn't change the death metal game, but certainly revealed some of the most ambitious routes it could take. At number 7 is Black Seeds of Vengeance by Nile. While Black Seeds of Vengeance is sonically very much at home amongst other technical death metal albums of the new millennium, it stood out through the use of ancient Egyptian instrumentation, through chromaticism that occasionally leans towards Phrygian dominant melodies, and a preoccupation with ancient Egypt in general. These traits, coupled with one of the most revered blast beat drummers, creates a dense yet moving and listening experience. While the use of ancient instrumentation and strictly ancient Egyptian themes on the surface may seem gimmicky, Carl Sanders' exploration of these themes stand out as one of the most unique muses in modern death metal or heavy metal in general. At number 6 is The Immeasurable Obzin by Meshuggah. Meshuggah's reputation and legacy is that of modernizing progressive metal and developing the controversial subgenre djent. What gets overlooked, however, is the impact Obzin had on death metal as an album, and it would be emulated by countless death metal and deathcore bands to come. The track Bleed alone created a challenge for drummers and guitarists to lock into a single rhythmic ostinato and that bludgeoning impact and detuned rhythm that would replace sweeping arpeggios for the hallmark of modern extreme metal. Any modern death metal bands utilizing an 8-string guitar and emphasizing polyrhythmic guitar playing are indebted to the influence of this album. At number 5 is the visceral monolith of inhumanity by Cattle Decapitation. Originally a grindcore band through and through, Cattle Decapitation began to incorporate melodic death metal elements on Monolith of Inhumanity and began to get the name checked in the same breath as many of modern death metal biggest practitioners. This isn't to say that the album discarded all of what grindcore brought to the now commonplace death grind subgenre. There are plenty of blast beats, frantic guitar lines, and a wide tonal array of vocal sounds and guttural screams. Where Monolith differs is cementing what Cattle Decapitation uniquely brought to the table, and their message against animal cruelty and systemic predatory behavior creates enough of an intense subject matter to be approved by any extreme metal diehard. At number 4 is the polarizing Are You Dead Yet by Children of Bodom. Already a controversial act prior to the release of Are You Dead Yet, Children of Bodom had created an uncompromising blend of death metal, metalcore, and symphonic metal that had endeared them to many, but also made them near impossible to categorize. This album was a definitive statement in this amalgamation, and while on the onset this album isn't tied to the history of death metal, it is a touchstone for the genre's influence and impact on the trajectory of modern metal. Coming in at number 3 is the Deathalbum by Dethklok. No, this isn't a joke, but the album is packed full of them. The companion album to the Adult Swim show Metalocalypse, the Deathalbum frequently asserts itself as a serious melodic death metal statement, but really is the love letter to all things metal by creator Brandon Small. Songs like Thunder Horse and Mermaider are absurd exaggerations, but are no less wonderfully produced death metal performances, and with the fanbase being in on the joke, Dethklok and the Deathalbum have been accepted by the larger heavy metal community. At the time of its release, the Deathalbum was the best-selling death metal album of all time, and while it hasn't retained this claim to fame, its connection to death metal fans and its exaggeration of the subculture brought both realism and respect to the fictional virtual band. At number 2 is Nocturnal by the Black Dahlia Murder. While European melodic death metal has influenced American metal bands and thereafter synthesized what became 2000s metalcore, the Black Dahlia Murder retained the earlier death metal tradition and with Nocturnal managed to carve a unique foothold via this familiarity. Nocturnal found enough common ground with this new metal audience to be included in many core and scene shows and playlists while never losing the intricacy, intensity, or frankly credibility they had earned as a death metal band. While not often name-checked along the influences of traditional death metal albums from the original Florida, Gothenburg, and Stockholm scenes, Nocturnal had been wide-reaching influence on those just adjacent enough to death metal to be either intrigued or converted entirely. Our number 1 pick for modern death metal albums is Kill by Cannibal Corpse. Cannibal Corpse is known for their death metal consistency, yet Kill can be seen as one of their definitive statements for many reasons. It marked the return of Rob Barrett on guitar, which harked back to the Bleeding and Vile albums, as well as their first collaboration with producer and future guitarist Eric Rutan. It was also their first album recorded in G-sharp tuning, paving the way for their contemporaries and students of British death metal, and ironically, was one of the few Cannibal Corpse albums to not have a graphic and controversial album cover. It simply read Kill. The music reflects the simple sentiment. They never relent in their musicianship, but there's a sense of urgency reinvigorated in the band presenting them anew for a younger and more desensitized audience. Kill was a restatement of one of the death metal's pioneers and a challenge to all around them.